What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Monday, February 27th, 2017. Tomorrow's the end of the month, then we're into March. We have got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. Now, obviously, the Academy Awards, well, first of all, happy Reichstag Fire Day. It was on this day in 1933 that the Reichstag burned down, allowing the Nazis to get emergency powers to deal with the terrorist crisis, which, of course, led everybody into ultimately World War II. Getting on to the Academy Awards, a couple of interesting things. First of all, that puff piece about the White Helmets did win the Best Short Documentary, and everybody was out there cheering and clapping. The Oscar goes to ISIS and Al-Qaeda and all the... And, of course, we know White Helmets is a phony group. The documentary was little more than an infomercial. But we've seen that throughout the years where the Academy Awards are given out for various political reasons, and I can think of no better example than the year that Avatar came on out, which was an amazing movie. It's still my all-time favorite film, is Avatar, and but it had a very strong anti-corporate, anti-military message at a time when corporate rule and militarism was on the rise, and the Best Picture went to The Hurt Locker, which wasn't even all that great of a movie, but that's the way these things get done. Huge embarrassment, apparently, when they went to award the Best Picture. Faye Dunaway was handed the wrong envelope. She was handed the envelope for Best Actress, and she read off the movie La La Land. And this went on for like 7 minutes, where all the people from La La Land are making their thank you speeches before somebody came on out and said, we messed up. It was actually Moonlight was the Best Picture. And by golly, there's another example of those evil Russian hackers just interfering with things. Obviously, it was those Russian hackers that went on in and interfered with our Academy Awards, and this means war. Oh, my goodness. You know, there are days when I do miss being in film production, and there are other days when I'm really kind of glad to be out of that circus. It really was kind of intense there. Now then, the chair of the U.S. House Intelligence Committee, Devin Nunes, has basically slammed the investigations, or let me put it this way, the claims that Donald Trump had some kind of link with Russia during their campaign. He's saying it's a witch hunt. There is no evidence to support it. The FBI is saying the same thing. So now the anti-Trump people are out there trying to say that Trump ought to be removed from office because he's showing symptoms of a lingering, untreated, sexually transmitted disease that can affect your mind. And we're seeing all of the behaviors that his brain has rotted away from one of his youthful indiscretions. These people are never going to give up. And the more fantastical and outrageous their claims get, the more silly they all look, and everybody's just laughing at them. Now, the Democratic Party, apparently Minnesota Representative Keith Ellison, who is now in line to be head of the DNC, is calling for the immediate impeachment of President Trump. He doesn't actually have a reason. He doesn't have any evidence. He just says, I want him out of there, and we're going to impeach him, and we're going to get rid of him. Right now, I know there's a lot of people that got whipped into a frenzy over the campaign season here. And I'll be the first to admit that in some areas Donald Trump has been a bit of a disappointment. But the reality is continuing this faction fight after the election is over is resulting in a fractured, dysfunctional government that almost seems on the verge of self-imposed paralysis, because everybody's trying to do their own thing. They're conflicting with each other. We're getting contradictory statements from various members within the government, contradictory messages regarding the wars. Trump is telling the CIA, don't support them anymore, and McCain's over there saying, we're going to go on supporting you. This is a government that is literally falling apart in front of all of us. All right, we're going to grab ourselves a phone call. Veronica in Iowa, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. I wanted to let you know there's hope. My liberal daughter is finally seeing the light. She's a teacher in a very low-income school outside of Chicago and is one of the only Caucasian people in the building. And she is suffering really terrible discrimination.
Mm-hmm.
She has learned that none of these students want or have any incentive to learn anything, despite all of her efforts. She teaches 7th grade English. Most of the kids come into her class with possibly at 1st or 2nd grade reading level. She's forced to pass all of these children to the next grade. The violence in the classroom is terrible. She's had her shoulder dislocated and her hands broken by
Ouch.
students. This is 7th grade.
Ouch.
7th grade girls did this. Recently, another student during quiet reading time, one student decided that was a great opportunity to attack another that he'd been having an issue with and choked him almost to death. The police officer that is on duty in the school had to literally resuscitate the other student. She's learning that these kids have no incentive to change. She's finally seeing the light. I mean, I could practically just have a party. I'm so happy. They have no incentive to try. I brought it up to her that slavery is owning another human being for your own personal profit, and that having a baby for your own personal profit is just another form of slavery. She had really not looked at it like that, but does now.
Well, there's another factor at work.
Finally seeing them for the way they are.
There's another factor at work, and that is that certainly all during the last year and even before that, the Hillary Clinton campaign, the Democratic campaign, have been exploiting this idea of victimhood, not just among the blacks, but among the Hispanics and women, saying that the only reason you're not successful is because those white male heterosexuals won't let you, and we're working toward a world where we're just going to give you the wealth that they produced with their labor just because you're a victim now. And unfortunately, a lot of people are actually believing that nonsense. And that's why these kids are going to school without a motive to learn, because they're really convinced if they just get out there and protest enough that Caesar will give them bread and circuses until the system breaks down.
Absolutely. And if she really tries to work with a student, and like I said, they have no incentive. They don't want to do anything. They go and complain, and she is dragged into the office and told she's racist. One of her students is the daughter of a superintendent and complains about her continuously and is often told by the principal again, if this racism doesn't stop, we're going to have to take other matters here. And she's really worried about her job.
Well, I can understand.
Racism isn't a really great thing to have happen to you.
Does not exactly dress up the resume. And, of course, I think it was last week we were talking about this university professor came on out and said trying to enforce good grammar rules on students was a form of racism because it's the white man's grammar and rules. And remember a few years ago they had Ebonics out there where it was okay for the blacks to make up their own language and their own rules, and you couldn't criticize them about it in school because then you were just being racist. And we're really getting into that bread and circuses phase, aren't we?
Oh, definitely. And I have conversations with a gentleman in China who is struggling to learn English and asks me a lot of questions, and I'm like, how is he ever going to come here and be able to have a conversation with certain individuals? It's not going to be possible. It's the insanity, but, I'm just so happy that she's finally waking up and sees that this is completely backwards. And that she is now being threatened and
discriminated against. Yeah, because we're seeing that. All these people screaming racism, what they want is racism in reverse, We were talking about that other university where they're now going to have white-free zones so that black students can get together and plan their social justice and, you know, all the rest of it. And it's just racism in reverse. If you want to end racism, you end racism. You don't say, we're going to be racist in reverse and that fixes the problem. That's simply perpetuating the problem with a new caste as master and subordinate.
I asked her if she felt like she was a victim of reverse discrimination, and she said there is no such thing. Discrimination is discrimination. And she had a valid point there.
Yes.
But I want to say thank you so much for everything you do. I love your show, and I'll be quiet now so you can go on to other callers.
All right, well, thank you very much here. And, of course, the term reverse discrimination is valid when a party that is feeling discriminated against wants to become the discriminator, because then it is going to reverse. But you're right, discrimination is discrimination. It's all bad. Racism is bad. And one of the things that we all have to be aware of right now is to not be so sensitive to whether we are being discriminatory or racist that we are oblivious to the fact we ourselves are now subject to racial discrimination or religious discrimination by other parties out there. And we shouldn't be silent if we feel that we're being unfairly treated, because otherwise the society is going to reverse, like happened down in South Africa and Zimbabwe, and look at how bad things wound up down there.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, well, thank you very much for the...
So I thank you kindly, and
all right,
and can't wait for the rest of the show.
Okay,
Thanks.
Give your daughter a hug from me. We'll let you go and do a quick shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. And we're going to switch over to Bob in Las Vegas. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. I didn't realize teaching was such a physical job.
Well, it certainly wasn't that way when I was teaching. I mean, I did have some incidents when I was teaching remedial math at the high school level, but certainly in my computer animation class at UH Manoa, we were all there to have fun and learn a great skill, and that was a very wonderful experience.
Well, any liberals or progressives that are listening to this show, that call probably put a big smile on their face. They see that nice crop of future Democrat voters.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And, of course, the Pentagon is looking at these classes and saying, yep, we're going to be able to talk these people into signing up for the military.
Absolutely. Oh, just, Mike, a quick comment. There was an interesting article on that Saker website about Ukraine. Apparently the Russians have announced they're going to start recognizing the passports, driver's licenses, and diplomas of the people in Donetsk and Lugansk.
Okay. That would seem like an appropriate thing to do.
Yeah, and also there was a mention in that article that Yanukovych, before he left, he signed an order requesting Russian intervention in during the time of the Maidan. So he basically Saker said, well, you see what's happening in Yemen. The ousted president called for intervention, which the Saudis and the U.S. are now doing.
Mm-hmm.
So if the Russians do intervene, they have the legal justification.
Well, I would argue that is not necessarily the case here. The two situations are not identical. In the case of Ukraine, Yanukovych was the democratically elected leader. In the case of Yemen, there was a covert overthrow, and they installed a puppet ruler, and it is that puppet ruler that is being ousted by the people of Yemen, who is now saying, you've got to come on in here and help me slap these people down so they'll accept their puppet ruler. So the situations are not quite the same. I'm expecting we're going to see Ukraine really, really heat up because, as you know, Russia is, Donbass is refusing to sell any more coal to Ukraine. And without it, Ukraine's steel industry is on the verge of collapse. So there's economic war already has broken out in Russia and Ukraine, and economic wars have a bad habit of turning into real wars.
Yeah, but from what I've been reading, and I've been following this story since it began, I don't even think the forces in Donetsk and Lugansk need any Russian help. I mean, of course, they need weapons and perhaps some guidance, but they don't need Russian soldiers or even volunteers. They can handle these Ukranazis themselves.
Yeah, you're absolutely true, because the Ukrainian troops are not motivated. They are not seeing this as a morally right war. The Ukrainian people are not at all happy with the junta under Poroshenko. He's dealing with riots all over the country in his side, and he's gone hideously into debt. He has not achieved the successes that he was sent in there to achieve. And I would not be surprised if Poroshenko himself was replaced in the very near future.
Okay. Oh, and how's Claire doing?
She's doing much better, and she'll probably be on the show this Friday.
Excellent. Okay, thank you, Mike.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to switch over to Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. Hey, Mike, we're not headed to British circus. We are in British circuses. We're in the last stage of an empire dying, Mike. It's the age of decadence. You could see it at the Hollywood Oscar. I used to watch the Oscars a long time ago, and it's got so politicized. What a joke. You know, what a joke these people are anymore, Mike. You know, like, I have a great new feeling on these people. I like their movies, but they suck as people.
Well, let's not
let's
not paint with too broad a brush, because I worked with those people for about 30 years, and it's a weird thing about Hollywood. Everybody you meet is either going to be an absolute saint that you just want to hang out with, or they're just completely the opposite, total sharks and jerks, and you're just saying, how could these people even be any kind of a success? As far as the Oscars, back when that was the award show, I think everybody tended to watch it. But now there's all these other new award shows, and they just seem to be wallowing in a lot of self-gratification, and it is highly politicized, and there's a lot of behind-the-scenes machinations. I remember the year that Stargate, the movie, got nominated for Best Visual Effects, and we got kicked out of the running by the Blue Ribbon Committee, so that Speed, which actually had very little visual effects in it, could take the Oscar, because they felt Speed could capitalize on that Oscar, sell more tickets with it than Carol Co., who had produced Stargate, and they were in serious trouble at the time. So there's a lot of back channel, and the politics are definitely there. Avatar was anti-imperialist, and so it was basically snubbed. Generally, I stopped watching the Oscars unless I had something in the running. These days, of course, I didn't actually watch them. I just picked up on the story about Faye Dunaway's goof. And again, it wasn't her fault. The people at Price Waterhouse, whoever was standing there with the envelopes, handed her the wrong envelope, and they messed up. And it took them 7 minutes to realize they'd made a mistake.
Hey, Mike, on your previous caller on Ukraine, they can handle the western part of the neo-Nazi group, but they still need an air force, and they also need some intelligence. So the Russians still need to be there to help out on that part, because we all know there's all those advisors in the western part.
Well, see, it's a complicated issue. Certainly on a moral level, a level of wanting everything to calm on down, it would be nice if Russia would step in and help, but that's exactly what the U.S. is waiting for Russia to do. Both in Ukraine and in Syria, they're trying to goad the Russians into some kind of an overt act that can be used to justify escalation, at least of a Cold War, if not a hot war.
And Mike, I just want to switch total gears real quick. I know you do computer graphics.
Yes.
But I don't know if you're aware that AMD's got a new Ryzen processor coming out on March 2nd. It's like half the price of the i7, which is a pretty powerful processor. It's double the price. So I was wondering if you're aware of the AMD tech coming out.
Well, I'm aware
of
I'm aware of the chips and everything, but I'm on the side of using software to make movies and TV shows. I had very little contact with game development, and it's these accelerated graphic chips are key to game development and game sales rather than the motion picture work. They have been useful. We actually put together an experimental accelerated graphic processor during Final Fantasy, and it was actually kind of cool to see it happen. Anyway, listen, Dustin, got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials. Back with more news after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Now, you've probably been hearing that Chelsea Clinton is entering public life, that she is preparing for a run for the U.S. Congress. as her first stepping stone to winning the White House. And apparently Chelsea is not well liked by the Democratic Party, which sees a lot of its recent downturns as directly influenced by the crimes and corruptions of the Clintons. And these people on the inside, they know what the real polling numbers were. They know what the real election numbers were. They're not seeing the Clinton name as one that is going to garner a lot of popular support. And so apparently during a Democratic National Committee forum earlier this month, a number of the attendees basically said this is not a good idea. And they're out there saying that Chelsea needs to go away. She said some horribly clueless things about progressives and progressive issues. She seems to have the patter down, the words and buzzwords and phrases, but not much thought behind them. And I'm looking at Chelsea Clinton, and in a way it kind of reminds me of stage mothers, or even more extreme, these mothers who have little girls for these baby beauty pageants or these toddler beauty pageants, which I think are kind of sick, to be very honest. But I've seen enough stage mothers to understand what's going on. Inevitably, you have these wannabe actresses who never got their big break, and then they have a kid, and they shove their kid into show business, trying to make them a success so that they can vicariously share that experience of the stardom they themselves did not make. And I can imagine right now Hillary Clinton is doing pretty much the same number on Chelsea Clinton's head. Hillary's out there saying, "You're going to be president, you're going to be president, we'll be back in the White House." And I hate to say it, it almost makes me feel a little sorry for Chelsea with all that she's had to deal with growing up in that whole Webb Hubble nonsense. But it's very interesting, again, going back to my experience in Hollywood. You will see what you would call dynastic families of people who become stars because their parents were stars or producers or directors. But I noticed quite a few movie stars' children would make a conscious decision to go into a completely different line of work because they didn't want to deal with that stage mother pressure. They didn't want to always be living in the shadow of their great father. And it can be a really interesting number on that. Now then, more about email gate. That is not going away. The fact that Hillary Clinton lost last year's election has not ended these investigations. And apparently there is a big fight with Judicial Watch trying to get some additional emails. Same thing with some of these congressional investigations, and they're all out there saying, why can we not get these mails? And there's a lot of focus on the 33,000 emails Hillary Clinton deleted before turning her servers over. And Jan R. Weinberg, founder of Show Up America, is saying there's a lot that was in there, and we need to see it. My question is, doesn't the NSA have those emails? Haven't we been told how they're reading all of our emails or saving all of our emails and peeking into everything that we're doing? So one of two things is either going on. Either the NSA has the emails and they're now in a position to blackmail the Clintons, or the NSA is spying on all of us as a gigantic bluff to try and get us to stay silent. Be careful what you tweet. Be careful what you put in Facebook. The NSA is going to see you. Frankly, from where I sit, the NSA is looking like a very costly, wasteful bunch of government incompetence. They certainly cannot find the ransomware writers. They can't find the cyber criminals. It seems to be open season on Americans for scams right now. Where is all this protection and care of our commerce that all of these very expensive agencies and bureaus are supposed to be doing? They're just not there. Now, as you know, John McCain is roundly being criticized for his continuing opposition to Donald Trump, his continuing to end run around Donald Trump trying to keep the wars going. But apparently 4chan has discovered that John McCain, well, we'll tell you when we get back from these words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Now, over at 4chan, they're doing some digging into John McCain, and it appears that he has his own little variation on the theme of the Clinton Foundation. It's called the McCain Institute. It is overtly a charity and organization to combat human trafficking. And examination of the financials, though, and some leaked emails are showing that it appears to be another pay-to-play operation, just the way Hillary was running the Clinton Foundation. They've got these donations coming in for $500,000 or $1 million, $1.5 million, and apparently all the money collected was not, none of it was spent on human trafficking. It all went over to the Arizona State University. And so the question is it a money laundering operation? Is it how John McCain manages to keep getting reelected in the state of Arizona despite his very terrible record? But there's definitely something going on over there. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Andy in Texas, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. Hey, I need some help from you. I got limited research ability. All I have is a smartphone. But it was brought to my attention a while back that there's these things called smokies. What they are, they're mobile incinerating vans. And evidently it was originated, from my information that I was able to get off my phone, they originated in Russia, and they had these mobile incinerators that they would go after a battle or whatnot, and they would incinerate their bodies and stuff. And in doing so and finding that information out, I discovered that they actually use those in Tulsa, Oklahoma on the homeless people. And now it's in San Francisco.
Well, wait a minute. I mean, I do know that there's obviously a question with so many homeless people on the streets of America, what is being done with the bodies. The usual saying is it goes to Potter's Field, even though I have no idea where the heck that would be. But you're making a lot of declarative statements, and so far you haven't actually pointed us at anything that we would consider to be like hard evidence, such as photos of these vans in these cities near the homeless. So we need to like pull back from too much speculation, as it were.
Well, and therein lies my question. I was wondering if perhaps with your ability to research this, perhaps you could find out whether or not it's true. I'm not calling up saying any of this stuff is true, but you have much better a way of researching it or whatnot. They're called smokies. Originally, they were found in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and now they're in San Francisco and L.A., and we can imagine that they're all around. But there's testimonials that I came across of people saying these homeless people have disappeared off the street. So they used to give you a ticket and just ship you to another city, but now these homeless people are just coming up.
Andy, that's sounding a little far-fetched for me. I mean, certainly there's the issue of what happens to the homeless who just die from like exposure during the winter or anything, but it sounds to me like you're claiming there's some kind of a deliberate mass extermination program.
I'm not claiming anything.
Okay, then
I'm asking you if you could look into it.
I have got more important things to look into right now, Andy. Thank you very much. We're going to let you go here and get on back to the news. I'm not. That sounds a little out there. Now then, getting on back to John McCain. Apparently, his McCain Institute, like the Clinton Foundation, is accepting money from foreign countries like Saudi Arabia and the Rothschilds. Now, remember, McCain is already in trouble because he was exposed for soliciting donations from Russia for his 2008 campaign, which is illegal. Now, apparently, recently, there were reporters who were trying to ask him about the McCain Institute and why they received a $1 million donation from the Saudi Arabian government. And apparently, McCain just cut off the reporters and said, I'm not going to talk about it, and so forth and so on. So it's sounding like there's something being covered up there. And maybe the reason nobody inside Washington, D.C. reacted to Hillary Clinton's foundation and the criminality surrounded with it, maybe they all have foundations. That's something that's far more important to look into than Smokies, I think. How many of these politicians are running these so-called charitable foundations? It's just another way to line their own pockets or have a slush fund. All right, we're going to take another phone call here. Steve in Texas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, how's it going, everybody? Now, this is funny. This is about Chelsea Clinton, okay? You'll like this. That was at my daughter's house in I have a granddaughter, and she's sitting with a couple of friends that are watching Walt Disney Channel one night, and they were watching a movie called Xena, Girl of the Future, and during the movie there's this one part where they're talking about certain things, and they went and Xena, the girl, she goes, well, President Chelsea Clinton said this about that. I was like, and this is a movie that was filmed way back in 2005.
Yeah, well,
I was blown away. It just took me out the corner of my eye when I was talking to my son-in-law and my daughter. I'm like, did you hear that? Well, they're kind of like, they don't understand what's going on, but it's just like, you didn't get that? Yeah, that's all I wanted to say.
All right. Well, what's the there's that animated science fiction cartoon where they're always talking about President Arnold Schwarzenegger. I mean, everyone was making fun of that idea. The Simpsons made fun of it.
It's just weird how they slide those things in there and so many years ahead, as if they're hoping, for heaven's sakes, that could happen. So they're like feeding the little ones like the seed, you know what I'm saying?
Well, there's another way to look at it, and that is, of course, that everybody's always searching for something interesting to put into their screenplays, and with all of that random ideas of suggestions, some of them are just out of pure luck going to turn out to be true, and it doesn't necessarily mean they were being prescient. It doesn't necessarily mean they're part of some kind of an evil conspiracy. It's just they got lucky is basically what happened.
Yeah. All right, well, I just want to let you go. I just wanted to bring that up because I thought it was kind of humorous. All right, guys. Take care, man.
Thanks an awful lot. Now then, getting on back here, story coming out of dailycaller.com. There's been a leak of an audio tape from an anti-Trump protest group, and basically showing that it's very organized, it's being funded, and they're trying to manufacture hostile town halls for Republicans all across the United States of America. And for those of you old enough to remember Watergate, these kind of tactics came right out of Donald Segretti's playbook, How to Disrupt the Opposition. So it's almost like the 2020 campaign is already underway, and they're pulling out the old Watergate playbooks to try and find some way to make sure that Donald Trump is not going to be able to win re-election. Okay, now then, let's see. Here's a good story. You're going to love this one. Remember at CPAC, there were these Russian flags with the name Trump printed all over them. And everybody was trying to make a big, see, it proves that Russia and Trump are swapping wet, sloppy kisses here. Turned out the flags were handed out to the crowd by Ryan Clayton, who's a writer for the Huffington Post, so that they could turn around and do this fake news story about Russia's support for Donald Trump and how they're all working together. And apparently, Ryan Clayton is part of Bob Creamer's group, America's Taking Action. And Bob Creamer is a provocateur who was busted by James O'Keefe's Project Veritas in a series of undercover videos using bird dogging to incite violence at Donald Trump rallies. This is real brown shirt tactics fully on display here. Now, getting into the war zones, once again, the United States government is out there saying Bashar al-Assad is using chemical weapons on civilians, blah, 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 blah. We've been down this road. I've lost track of the number of times they've tried this story. And even though there is no proof for it whatsoever, and that every claim of these gas attacks is either contradicted by UN chemical weapons inspectors or it's turned out to be a media hoax, the United States is going ahead with a draft resolution for more sanctions against Syria over using sarin gas on their own Alawite supporters. Russia has vowed to veto in the Security Council, and I think they really should, because the United States government has gone totally overboard with this guilt by accusation, return to Napoleonic Code, and this attempt to use sanctions to paralyze and strangle other countries into submission. It is a form of economic warfare, and they're risking real open warfare by continuing to do so. Meanwhile, the RAND Corporation, which is this really big think tank that works for the government. They've been around forever. And apparently they've come up with a plan on how Syria is going to be partitioned after all the shooting is over, and they're going to break it up into little tiny pieces, and Assad is going to get Damascus over there, and, you know, our people will get the oil, and there'll be an area for the refugees. But the RAND Corporation is already warning that this attempt to partition Syria is going to trigger not only massive ethnic cleansing in various areas, it will be a new massive flood of Syrian immigrants flooding into Europe and the United States of America. You would think after all this damage and destruction that somebody would get the idea, maybe it's time to just leave things alone. Stop messing around with other people's countries, because the backflash is getting really out of control. Now, Russia's special presidential envoy for the Middle East and Africa, Deputy Foreign Minister Mikhail Bogdanov, is basically saying that any military presence in Iraq is unacceptable without the permission of the government, which makes perfect sense to me. Unless you've declared war on somebody and you're invading their territory, you can't just come on in and say, we're going to help you bomb the people that we think are bad, which is also, of course, what the U.S. is doing in Syria. The United States does not have permission of Syria's government to be conducting military operations over Syrian soil in Syrian airspace, especially with that lousy track record they have of claiming they're going after ISIS and Al-Qaeda and, in fact, blowing up hospitals, water treatment plants, food storage, and so forth. Story coming out of Breitbart now. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, when she was in charge of the U.S. State Department, continued a program to foment revolutionary social media activists for regime change in various parts of the world, and the program arguably had major detrimental consequences for the Middle East. Now remember, somehow or other, $6 billion went missing from the State Department under Hillary Clinton's watch. And maybe that's what part of that money was being spent for, to try and bring down governments in other countries and pave the way for U.S. subservient puppet rulers. Now, Iran is responding to the increased saber-rattling by the United States. They've just staged a massive naval drill covering 2 million square kilometers of ocean. And it started yesterday. They've got ships, submarines, and helicopters. And they're basically going to hone up their skills along Iran's southeastern coast. Now, the corporate media is going to say, see how provocative it is. They're out there with their ships and planes. And again, this is their coastline. And they have every right to be there carrying out military exercises. If Iran was sailing ships around the Gulf of Mexico, you might have a point. But, folks, all you need to do is look at who is sending their forces to the other side of the planet in a threatening manner. And it's the United States. Whether it's Syria, Iran, that whole Gulf area, the South China Sea, we know who the aggressor is. And historically, especially since the start of the industrial era, all wars are lost by that initial aggressor. Something to keep in mind. Apparently, clashes are going on in Lebanon, in Ain Halwa, and there's a Palestinian refugee camp. Apparently, injuries are reported there. Now, since Donald Trump took office, both China and the U.S. have kicked off massive naval buildups, and both are claiming fears of the other's increasing maritime military power as the reason. So there's a new naval arms race between the U.S. and China. I think the timeline is probably a little bit more accurate to say that the U.S. started provoking China in that South China Sea. China started ramping up their naval shipbuilding. And the U.S. said, oh, look, China's building more ships. We have to do the same. Money, 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 money. And I don't think it's necessarily tied in with Donald Trump's election, because this provocation of China was occurring underneath the Obama administration. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Glenn from Philadelphia. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I was wondering if you could conduct a research study and commission a poll to determine why it is that talk radio show callers think that talk radio show hosts are human search engines, research institutes, and polling agencies.
By golly, that's a study that does need to be done. And, all kidding aside, I do get a lot of email from people asking me questions, and it takes 30 seconds with a search engine to find the answer. And if there's one thing that I would hope the independent media is going to get across to the general population is that you don't need us to find this information for you. Get onto a non-Google search engine, and you can find everything you need to ask whatever your question is. Just learn to trust your own analytical skills. I think you're all very smart. You wouldn't be here otherwise. And I trust you to be able to figure out for yourself what's going on. And I'll share what information I can with you. But if you have a question, like the Smokies, do your own homework. Come up with something, okay?
Right, exactly. That's my point exactly. I always end up shaking my head. It's like, this person, I see it on blog forums, too. People will post questions in these raucous blog forums, and I'm like, you could have looked on the search engine and found that yourself in 10 seconds.
Some of these people are trying to direct us to get us to look in a different direction than we're currently looking, simply to tie up our time and resources and waste our time so that we're not looking where we ought to be looking. And I have to say that Smokey story certainly felt a lot like that one. So.
Right, exactly. Hey, one other quick aside. I don't know if you at all have any interest in earthquakes, but a number of months ago when we had that big earthquake that caused damage in New Zealand, I had been looking around online at USGS and EMFC and stuff like that, and I found there's this fellow who does research using earthquake 3D. His name's Dutch Sin.
Yeah, I've seen his stuff. I've seen his stuff. Yeah, he is. I got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go to Mike in Kentucky. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha. I think maybe out in Hawaii you guys have better diet. Maybe you've got healthier fats from the macadamia nuts and stuff. And I used to think, I was surrounded by people that had no reading comprehension skills and things like that, but I've seen some guys doing man-on-the-street interviews without naming any names. You probably know exactly who I'm talking about.
Yes. And
people will take a Hershey bar instead of a silver coin or a silver bar and standing in front of a pawn shop where they go walk in there and buy 20 Hershey bars for what they'd get for that. And I think you got a little more high expectations than from what I see day to day. People will have.
There's something you need. There's something you need to understand about those man in the street interviews. The ones you're talking about, they'll shoot all day, and then they'll cherry pick out the ones that make people look the worst.
I see people doing stuff online every day that, the information is right in front of them, and they will ask the question with the information like, whatever, 5 lines up the page from them, and they don't bother to read. I think the reading comprehension level is just fell through the floor, and the Obama phones and smartphones and all these abbreviations that people are using, they don't take the time to read.
Definitely the new technology has altered the way we interact with information, and we talk about reading, and reading is very important, but obviously in this modern age, iconography and imagery and video are becoming a much larger proportion of the information flow coming into us. But again, part of it is an intellectual laziness. And I fault the corporate media for that, because the corporate media has constantly put out this message, just sit back and be receptive and we'll tell you all that you need to know. And a lot of people are having a hard time breaking that habit. Even coming to the independent media, they want to interact with us the way they interacted with the corporate media, and that's not the way that we're operating here. We're not spoon-feeding you information and telling you this is what you believe today. What we're really trying to do is encourage you to become your own best analyst and your own best researcher, and start trusting your own mind over anybody else that's out there.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate. I think they've studied some of this. It's creating a social autism too, and the when I was in school, I don't know about you, if you ever took any journalism courses, they used to teach that you were supposed to write to the broadest common denominator about a 6th grade level, and now they're supposed to be writing to a 9th grade level, I've recently heard is the sentiment, but I don't see that. I mean, it doesn't seem like it's that way, and I don't think they're encouraging lifelong learners. I've learned way more than since I got out of school by following along the Patriot movement and that sort of stuff than I did while I was in school.
All right, well, listen, I'm going to have to let you go, Mike. We got to do a station identification here, and we'll be back in hour number 2. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And I want to respond to that last caller that we had just before the top of the hour here. I did, in fact, take a journalism class when I was in college. I was required to take courses outside my preferred field of study, which at that point in my collegiate career was astronomy. And I really did enjoy it. We were not taught to pander to a 6th or 9th grade because most of us were writing articles for the college newspaper. And so we were aiming at a college crowd. We were not under that constraint. But we did report on the topical things of that day. And we learned the basics of journalism. Multiple sources, confirmation, no speculation. And I remember one assignment I was given is there was a local minister who was ordaining young men in order to make them exempt from the Vietnam draft. And I was assigned to go and interview him, which I did. And during the course of the interview, he actually ordained me a minister, which... So I'm legally a minister in the state of California. And on the last day of class, I held communion with Manischewitz wine and oatmeal cookies. So that was my journalism in college experience, as it were. Getting on back to more serious issues, Donald Trump is getting ready to announce his new budget. He's going to increase the budget for the Pentagon, $54 billion. And I question that, first of all, because of all the money the Pentagon already has. In light of the trillions the Pentagon seems to have completely misplaced and has no idea where it went. And more to the point, the very costly but poorly performing weapon systems coming out of our current defense establishment. Now, the reality is, when you are in a war, the first side that runs out of money is going to lose. And if you have hideously expensive weapons that are breaking down, are easy to destroy, and cost a huge amount of money to replace each one, simply on a basis of attrition, you're going to lose. You're going to run out of things. And I think Trump, before he starts handing the Pentagon any more money, should be saying, you need to tighten up your ship and get more bang for your buck. And you need to find where all those trillions of dollars went to that nobody seems to know where it went. Now, Trump is apparently trimming the budget at the State Department and over at the EPA. I'm definitely on board with that last one here. But really, Trump, for somebody who's coming out of a business environment, his handling of the defense establishment surprises me. I would have thought he would have gone on in and say, look, you got to get these things cheaper. And he did initially. He got Boeing to back off on the price of the new Air Force One. He's gotten some of the suppliers for the F-35 to lower their prices, which shows you that they were inflated right from the beginning. But I don't think that's enough, especially if there really is a war on the horizon. We need to have very inexpensive, effective weapons instead of these bloated behemoths that are being fielded out there. The Gerald R. Ford aircraft carrier, they're now saying it may never actually be useful in real combat. F-22 still has a ceiling based on pilots not being able to breathe. The problems with the F-35 are legion. The Independence-class littoral combat ship, chronic hull corrosion. The Freedom-class littoral combat ship, drivetrain problems. The Zumwalt stealth destroyer, drivetrain problems, and on and on and on and on. In many ways, Donald Trump is facing the same problem with the defense establishment that Harry Truman did. And one of the reasons Harry Truman was so very popular with the American people is he went out to all these defense contractors and he said, you're not getting any more money until you start producing decent product at a good price. And that's what Trump ought to be doing with our Pentagon. Now, most of us looking back at UN Ambassador Samantha Power were relieved when she finally stepped down because of her gross incompetence and simple arrogance. Unfortunately, Nikki Haley is not much of an improvement. In fact, Nikki Haley almost makes Samantha Power look like a giant in world affairs and diplomacy. And apparently, over at the United Nations, the impression is that our latest ambassador to the United Nations is pretty much clueless. So, now then, we're going to take a phone call. Nick in Southern California, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. I was calling in because, actually, a buddy of mine from Maui, grew up on Maui, he knows of your show. And, I hadn't seen him in a long time. That's not why I called in, but I thought I'd mention that.
Okay.
I was watching the Oscars. In fact, I didn't want to watch them. I was afraid they would be too political. One of the messages that they were sending out, it made me kind of think that the left might be beginning to understand that all of the heavy-duty Trump bashing is backfiring on them. Because one of the messages that they sent out, I don't know, some play actor was saying something along the lines of resistance without hate. Something, I think they're trying to soften their stance. And I was wondering if you heard that and what you thought of that.
I did not watch the Academy Awards. I haven't watched them in a lot of years. I'll just read who the winners are the next morning. And at this point, I don't let the Academy Awards sway me in terms of what movies I'm going to see or not see. It probably comes out of my disenfranchisement, having been through that process myself. But yeah, unfortunately, the Academy Awards have been politicized. I think that sort of discredits them. And it's true with all of these awards programs. They've become just another soapbox for people to get on up and scream about particular agendas.
Yeah, well, I wasn't watching them by choice. I was actually working at somebody's house, and they had it on, so I really didn't want to watch them. If that, makes you feel better.
Well, that's what iPods are for. Just stick in the headphones and, listen to favorite music. All right, well, Nick, we're going to let you go. Thanks an awful lot for the phone call and the update on the Oscars. And, yeah, I got that from several other sources, that they are even more politicized than ever before. And it does undercut the idea that these awards are supposed to be based on merit. The best acting performances, the best picture, the best technical. And when it becomes this political, you start to wonder, are these awards actually being given out to the best quality work, or are they being handed out like any other gold thing to make you pay attention to certain people and not pay attention to other people? Good example would be Robert De Niro. I don't think we're ever going to see him on that stage ever again following his work on the vaccine crisis. So we'll see. All right, we're going to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Moving on here, there's more fighting in Donbass. Apparently, the coal blockade is actually coming from Ukrainian nationalists who are trying to bring down the Poroshenko government. Donbass was not behind this. Somebody wrote in to correct me on that. But it is completely utter chaos over there. And I have to admire the extreme patience of the Russian republics, who still have not shut off that flow of natural gas to Ukraine, even though Ukraine is not paying their bill. I wish Americans could get that kind of forgiveness from the utilities companies, but that's another issue entirely. More and more people are expressing their concern over the large number of senior Russian officials that are dying unexpectedly under questionable circumstances. Now, Valerie Pikin's channel is out there saying that it is the CIA that is killing off all of these people. Arsen Pavlov with Motorola, commander in the Donbass region, the Russian ambassadors to Turkey and India, Mikhail Tolsk, commander in the Donbass, and now the permanent representative to the UN, Vitaly Churkin. And a lot of people are roping in that airplane crash that killed the choir from the Russian army, which, maybe a little bit too much. I think it's premature to say that it's Russia. Certainly, Russia's resistance to the New World Order means Russia's government is a target for the globalists and Soros. And again, the way that Ukraine threw a tantrum when the Security Council wanted to pass a resolution about Churkin's death almost makes it look like they're the guilty party. We don't really know. It's premature to say. But certainly the fact that Churkin's death came about at the same moment that we found out McCain had been soliciting him for donations for his 2008 campaign points the finger of guilt in yet another direction out there that we need to keep an eye on. But there's a lot of wet work going on, and we need to just be very sensitive to that. We're still waiting to get the toxicological tests on Churkin because the initial autopsy did not identify a readily available reason for this guy to have died. Now, apparently, Israeli special forces have entered Syrian territory supposedly to monitor extremist groups fighting Assad. Now, they don't have Syria's permission to be there, but they're going to stand there. They're going to monitor the extremist groups fighting Assad. Sure, yeah, they are. And, of course, last Wednesday, Israel flew over the ISIS strongholds in Lebanon and dropped bombs on the Syrian army positions in Syria, just before peace talks in Geneva were scheduled to begin. So they were trying to derail that. They don't want peace. They want more war. They want more chaos. Now, there's been another incident in which a Jewish cemetery has been vandalized. This one's up in Philadelphia. More than 100 headstones were knocked over. And following on Israel's prior pattern, that means Israel's about to do something really, really nasty and is preemptively playing the victim card as they always do. It's a repeating pattern. Every time Israel's getting ready to do something terrible to their neighbors, there'll be a spate of anti-Semitic attacks. Oh, feel sorry for us, feel sorry for us. Oh, we're always the victim. How can you be a victim when you got 200 nuclear weapons? Colin Powell's confirmed it. Now the Pentagon is confirming it. This poor, helpless Israel surrounded by horrible enemies shtick is getting very, very tiring. Apparently over at Capital University, there's been another student who confessed to faking several hoax hate crimes. This is how people get attention, how they make political hay, how they get the media to talk about their agenda. Oh, I'm the victim of a hate crime. Now, getting onto the corporate media, Donald Trump is poking fun at the New York Times because the New York Times has put out an ad trying to save its reputation by saying, in these days, truth is more important than it ever was. Well, truth is always important, but the New York Times hasn't always had that opinion. They were certainly at the forefront of those telling us Saddam had nuclear weapons and we had to attack him. And we're seeing George W. Bush has now come on out saying that a free press, meaning the corporate media, is essential to the functioning of democracy. In other words, unless they can go back to a world where you believe and trust the corporate media, they can't control you anymore, and that's why they are in such a panic over the independent media. But it's way too late for the New York Times to be talking about truth after their long history. A Wall Street Journal NBC poll is finding the majority of the American people is finding the corporate media coverage is too critical and exaggerated. The majority of the American people have lost their trust and faith in the corporate media. Jesse Waters is out there slamming what he sees as the dying political populist prostitutes. And a lot of this is coming on down to that White House Correspondents' dinner, where CNN and the New York Times took the attitude of, well, we may not show up because of how disreputable President Trump has been treating us. And Trump came back and said, you guys can have fun. I'm not showing up. And why should he? Why should Trump show up knowing that everybody in that room is going to be finding some way to take a pot shot at him? This is the White House. It's not a celebrity roast. CNN has been caught purchasing 16 million fake Twitter followers. There is a website out there that allows you to audit the followers on a Twitter account to see how many are real people and how many are being manufactured by these companies that for a fee will create fake Twitter followers for you. And almost half of CNN's followers are manufactured fakes. This goes on top of that story we had from a couple of weeks ago where clicks to the corporate media websites are being artificially inflated by Chinese botnets. And all of this, of course, is defrauding their investors because the ad rates are based on what their readership is, and if they're artificially doubling the readership, they're cheating their own advertisers. Now then, apparently there has been a judge that has upheld a $30 million lawsuit against CNN, denouncing CNN as reckless in terms of the accuracy of its reporting. And the lawsuit was filed by this West Palm Beach hospital that the CEO, who accused CNN of purposely skewing statistics to make the hospital look bad. And Judge Evans didn't mince words in her 18-page order allowing the case to move forward. Basically saying, in our case, we contend CNN essentially made up its own standard in order to conduct an apples-to-oranges comparison to support its false assertion that St. Mary's mortality rate was 3 times higher than the national average. I always thought the mortality rate was 1 per customer. Now, this reminds me of a scandal that came out many years ago from ABC. It was called the Primetime Live Food Line Scandal. And what it was is the Food Handlers Union, the union for supermarket workers, was trying to get into Food Line. Food Line was resisting. And so ABC decided to do an expose of the unsafe practices over at Food Line. 2 ABC producers posed as food workers in order to get jobs at a Food Line store. And they were assisted by the United Food and Commercial Workers Union, which provided them with fake references to get those jobs. The producers secretly videotaped the Food Line workplace with the aid of cameras hidden in their wigs. And using this footage, Primetime Live reported that Food Line sold tainted meat. The bad publicity led Food Line to shut down 84 stores over the next 2 years, throwing thousands of employees out of work. Outtakes from the hidden camera footage showed that the charges were completely manufactured. The ABC producers were taking meat and chickens and just dropping them on the floor and then putting them back on the shelf for the camera. The ABC producers were revising the sell-by dates. And this went to court, and ABC wound up having to pay one of the largest settlements for that time period, $5.5 million. This is what corporate media does. Now then, the Oxford Dictionary's word of the year is post-truth, which sounds like 2 words, but it's hyphenated. And it's an adjective defined as relating to or denoting circumstances in which objective facts are less influential in shaping public opinion than appeals to emotion and personal belief. In other words, they're trying to make lying socially acceptable. It's not lying, it's a post-truth story. We're manipulating you, but there's a word for it, and that makes it legitimate now. No, it's still lying. It is still lying. That's what they do. That's why they make the huge amounts of money that they do. Now let's get on to the economic news. More and more people are starting to call on Donald Trump to restore precious metals as the monetary base of our economy, to start pulling away from the Federal Reserve, or at least allow the creation of a parallel currency that doesn't accrue interest to the Federal Reserve the way John F. Kennedy did. But we know this private central banking system cannot last forever. It has a built-in self-destruct mechanism. No country with a private central bank has ever survived for very long until debt kills it. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're seeing an article over here in IntelliHub where gold continues to defy the Federal Reserve's attempts to control the price, and they're quoting an article coming out of Bloomberg News, where Bloomberg is admitting there is a hidden mandate from the Federal Reserve to control the price of gold. And we've been saying this all along, because if the price of gold were to start going up, people would close those negative interest rate savings accounts, they would empty their stock portfolios, and they would start buying physical gold. And right now, Wall Street and the banks, they need your money inside their system to keep playing their little games. And that's why everywhere that you see them pushing for the cashless society, paired with it is a restriction on the ownership of private investment metals by ordinary citizens, to force you into dependence on the bank for every single financial transaction you do. And enforced dependency is slavery. That's what started the American Revolution. Now, over in Europe, the numbers are not looking good at all. They're talking about the Target 2 imbalances hitting crisis levels. And they've exceeded the crisis level set back in 2012 when Greece was on the verge of leaving the Eurozone. And other countries are starting to notice things are not working out either. Apparently, the German bond market yield is falling as predictions of Marine Le Pen's possible election victory in France grow. And they're saying this will be an economic as well as a political shock. Story out of Investment Watch blog, Italy's crisis will be worse than Greece. And yes, it will be. They did too much patching, too much rigging, too much fixing. And they built up a huge pile of debt that has to be paid for somewhere or written off. Written off. Now, apparently, the EU's attempt to bail out Portugal has failed. Portugal is still having a crippled economy. And again, what we're seeing here is the result of private central banking, of having a dishonest money system, a system based on debt and interest. It's not the system the United States started with. When you have the currency loaned into circulation at interest by a private central bank, by design, the interest, the debt, grows faster than the available money supply until so much of the gross domestic product is being absorbed servicing that debt, there's nothing left over to run the nation with. That's what's happening all across Europe. Happened in Greece, happening in Portugal, happening in Italy, and the money junkies will not let go. Royal Bank of Scotland is warning of more job cuts and branch closures after plunging $7 billion, with a B, into debt. Where's all the debt coming from? It's that 11th marble. Private central banking, by design, produces debt in order to enslave people and nations to those private central bankers. It's that simple. We're seeing the effects right now. Over in Germany, some of their economic experts are talking about a free trade deal with Russia. Getting rid of all these sanctions and having a free trade deal with Russia and saying is highly profitable for both parties. Yeah, anytime you're doing trade without some governmental organization looking over your shoulder and taking a piece of the action for the benefit, you're going to do better. Now, we've been talking about Nestle and the raw deal the people of the state of California got with Nestle literally sucking out their aquifers and bottling it and selling it back to the people of California for $2 a bottle. And apparently Nestle is tired of all the complaints tired of the bad image and concerned over actions by the state of California that may move to constrain some of their more egregious practices, Nestle is now going to move their headquarters to Virginia. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, Wendy's has announced they're going to start replacing employees with 1,000 self-ordering kiosks this year. Now, I don't do a lot of fast food restaurants anymore, but when I do, I generally tend to go to Wendy's because the food does seem to be somewhat better than some of the other stores here. But I'm going to tell you right now, I absolutely will not deal with an automated sales system because it means somebody has lost their job. And right now, it is so important to bring jobs back to working and middle-class people to start recycling some of that accumulated wealth at the very top of the pyramid back down into decent wages and salaries for the American people so we can pour that wealth back into the system and keep it going. And unfortunately, all of these money junkies are so short-sighted, they don't see that. They don't see that their employees collectively are also collectively their customers. And they all want to offshore and they want to automate, and then they wonder why nobody is showing up to buy things at the restaurants and the stores anymore. And I will not go to the self-checkout at Sam's or Home Depot, and I'm not going to go to the self-ordering kiosk at Wendy's or anybody else. We're heading toward a world in which all of our factories and our stores are going to be staffed with robots, standing around with absolutely nothing to do because the humans don't have the money to buy the products. Can you not see that's what is coming on this trend? More importantly, why doesn't our economic leadership, why doesn't Trump see that? Now, the other day we were talking about McDonald's declining fortunes, and I pointed out that a big strategic mistake that McDonald's did was they abandoned their original market niche of very inexpensive food, served quickly, and they tried to go upscale with fancy interiors and a cafe and all this other stuff, and it really didn't work. Well, apparently McDonald's has realized their strategic mistake, and they are now going on a program of cutting their prices to try and reclaim market share, because right now fast food consumption in general has fallen to an all-time low, both for economic and health reasons. And they're trying to get that business going. And again, if you automate, if you offshore, those people that you have let go from their jobs are not contributing any new wealth to the economic system. For an economy to be healthy, the money, inevitably, there's going to be a pyramid, but there has to be a recycling mechanism that gets that money from the top of the pyramid back down to the bottom in decent wages and salaries so it can be poured back in to buy the various products, new cars, new TVs, Big Macs. Unfortunately, under our current system of economic fascism, where the ultra-rich have loopholes to avoid paying taxes, and the tax burden is falling on the lower classes, the system is stalling. It's grinding to a halt here. And nobody wants to take the steps necessary to get it going again. They just want to find somebody else to blame for it. It's those gosh darn Russians. They're messing with our economy here. JCPenney and Macy's are turning America's malls into ghost towns. This is out of government slaves. And we're seeing these big box, well, not the big box retailers, but established retail names, brand names. These are iconic American names, JCPenney and Macy's. I remember going down to Penny's, in Concord when I was a kid. It was full of all kinds of wonderful things. At one point they even called it the five and dime. Shows you how prices have grown there. But as these large anchor tenant stores are not being the draw for customers they used to be, the whole mall itself suffers. Because that's how you set up a shopping mall. You will have the big anchor tenants The stores everybody wants to get to, and then once they're on the premises, they walk up and down the mall and they look at the specialty stores. And they spend a little bit more. If your anchor tenant stores at the ends of the malls, the Sears, the Macy's, if they're not pulling in customers, if customers don't feel they've got the money to go there, then they're not going to be walking up and down looking at the smaller specialty stores. And I got to tell you, this mall we have down here at the bottom of the hill, vacancies, and there are optimistic people starting up new stores, and they're not lasting. They're not surviving. They really are not. Apparently over in New York, retired New York workers are having to pinch pennies to survive because their pension is running out of money. And again, all of this pension problem goes right back to that 2008 mortgage-backed security fraud meltdown, where Wall Street's pet rating agencies said these mortgage bundles are AAA, which made it legal for pension funds to invest in them. The fraud collapsed. The pensions were defunded. And nobody's got the courage to say Wall Street did this. It's all, oh, you pensioners, you're living too long. You're expecting too much. You know, really, you've got to learn to live with less so the banks can have more. Speaking of banks having more, apparently banks are making a huge profit on ATM fees and overdraft fees. And it's kind of weird. The banks got the automated teller machines in order to not have to hire human workers, and then they turn around and charge the customers more to use them if you're outside of your own bank. And apparently this is a $6.4 billion revenue stream for the banks every year. I remember, this is a long, long time ago, one of the major banks was actually sued because they set up their computer systems. When it did the overnight reconciliation run on your account, it would charge the checks from your account before it would apply the deposits in order to trigger more overdrafts and more overdraft charges, and they got sued for that and had to go back to this, what we would consider common sense model. Put the deposits in the account, then charge the checks. Right now, inflation is running at a 58-month high, and we're starting to see it in food prices out here. You're probably seeing it there as well. Now, there's a very enlightening article that came out of ZeroHedge.com, Behold, the Dow Jones Non-Industrial Average. And they're talking about something that a lot of people have commented on over the last several weeks. We're seeing the Dow Jones numbers just really, really up there. And yet, when you look at that core industrial durable goods orders, they're well below the peak in 2008. Something funny is going on. The Dow Jones Industrial Averages are saying these stocks are sky high, yet the earnings by these underlying companies just are not there to support that. Now, moving forward from that article on Bloomberg about how the Federal Reserve is trying to keep gold prices down, obviously the counterpart to that is keeping stock prices up to keep them attractive, to keep your money in their system. And this leads us to another article out of Zero Hedge. Are the big banks' dark pools behind the run-up in bank stock prices? And they're looking at this history where the biggest banks on Wall Street, foreign and domestic, have been repeatedly charged with rigging and colluding in markets from New York to London to Japan. And the suspicion is they've formed a cartel to rig their own bank stocks to keep them from dropping. All of this, of course, is fraud. If you, as a private citizen, were engaging in this kind of behavior, you would go to jail. But in the United States of America, bankers are above the law. They are not arrested no matter what they did during the mortgage-backed security fraud. Nobody went to jail. Other countries are waking up. Iceland, Iran, China, now Spain. Spain put a former director of the International Monetary Fund in prison for bank fraud. Nobody should be above the law in the United States of America. Not politicians, not celebrities, not bankers. That's not what America is supposed to be about. Now, as you know, there's a huge debate going on about Obamacare. And whether it should be reformed or repealed, I think we should go back to a free market approach where there's competition for your business. Competition will drive down the premiums and drive up the quality of service. As it turns out, according to a digital expert, Michael Brown, the majority of the online posts and social media comments in support of Obamacare are paid for. 60% of all the online Obamacare defenders are paid to post positive messages. And again, nothing new. Public relations firms openly advertise this as a service to their clients. For a fee, they will have a bunch of people get onto the internet using multiple fake identities to post your particular point of view into discussions to try and steer it. The term for it is called grassroots lobbying. And here's where it gets kind of interesting, because under the law, a lobbyist approaching a politician must identify themselves as a lobbyist and who their client is. But public relations firms are allowed to lobby ordinary people and not reveal that's what's going on. Grassroots lobbyists do not have to reveal that's who they are or who they work for. They can pretend to just be ordinary citizens. I remember running into one of these people when I was living in Washington State when there was a big debate over the old-growth forests. And I was riding on an airplane from Los Angeles back up to Washington State, and I was sitting next to one of these people who did not know who I was and what I was doing. And they were going on about how they were getting ready, they were going to move into this little town in Washington State, and they were going to go around and be seen and be friendly and tell everybody they had come to live there and sort of be accepted as part of the community, so that at a planned public hearing a month down the road, they would walk on in and be accepted as one of the local people when they were there pushing the agenda of going ahead and cutting down the old-growth forest, because after all, they're such a terrible fire hazard, really. Really. And that's how it works. That's how they try and steer you around. So 60% of those online positives for Obamacare are bought and paid for propaganda by the public relations firms. Now, let's talk about Donald Trump's immigration order. He's coming out with a new one. He's pulled back on some of the explicit language that had people upset, although let's be very honest, it doesn't matter what Donald Trump says in this, it's still going to come under attack from all the New World Order, globalists, pro-immigration people. I mean, Donald Trump could cure cancer tomorrow, and all they'd do is scream about all the doctors and nurses he put out of business. So this new order will include exemptions for legal permanent residents and green card holders, and it will not block people who do have a legal right to be coming to this country. But it's still going to come up against opposition, because at this point, the liberals are simply at war with Donald Trump. There is nothing he can say or do that is going to satisfy them. Now, former French President François Hollande is attacking British Prime Minister Theresa May for refusing to accept 3,000 unaccompanied child refugees stranded in France who have family that has already managed to sneak inside to Great Britain. And Hollande is saying that Britain simply must accept responsibility for the refugee children in France. Really? Why isn't France accepting responsibility for them? They let them in. And why is nobody talking about all these U.S. wars of aggression that made these people refugees in the first place? Now, the strain of all these refugees is really beginning to show. In fact, at this point, the European Union is saying their pension system may be harmed by this. The refugees right now are estimated to be costing 30 billion British pounds a year, and it's being called an economic catastrophe. We have the same thing going on here. The illegal immigrants and the refugees are a huge drain on the taxpayer. And all of these stories coming on out about how these people are actually good for the economy. No, they're not. Because it's all cash outflow. And yes, they'll take their free handouts and they'll go to the store and they'll buy things, but they are not producing anything of value to the U.S. economy. Now, apparently up in Canada, Trudeau is coming under serious pressure, even from within his own party, to stop the influx of these asylum seekers. And now they have a problem with asylum seekers in the United States who are concerned about being deported by Trump. Now they're going across the border into Canada. Now, apparently over in a German refugee center, there was a huge fight between Gambian and Albanian refugees, which wound up with people hospitalized. And apparently, somehow, these refugees got iron rods or bars from either the furniture or bits of the building and started beating on each other. This is not working out at all. And, of course, meanwhile, the corporate media is saying, oh, well, you're just, exaggerating. This is all working out really, really well. Now, as you know, there's this Swedish detective who's gone public at risk not only of his job, but his freedom. And his name is Peter Springair. He's been in the police for 40 years. And he's out there saying the influx of migrants has brought a huge, huge crime problem with it. And the government is trying to keep a lid on it, not let it be publicized. Remember, over in Germany right now, Merkel actually passed a law saying the German media may not identify the nationality or immigration or refugee status of sexual criminals. This is a public relations nightmare. They're not looking for a new solution. They're just trying to make it all look good. That's how politicians think. We made a mess of it. How do we make it look good for the voters? And that's what's going on. Paul Joseph Watson is out there saying 58% of Swedish welfare payments are going to the immigrants. 58%, 60%, who now comprise 16%, 1/6 of the population. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And apparently Bill O'Reilly made a little bit of a whoopsie, maybe, maybe not. On the O'Reilly Factor, Bill O'Reilly directed a debate over this issue about Sweden, immigration, and crime. And on one side, they had a Swedish newspaper reporter, Ann-Sophie Nuslund, who argued against the notion that immigration was making Sweden somehow more dangerous. On the other side was a man named Nils Bildt, who was identified on screen and verbally as a Swedish defense and national security advisor. After the show was all over, Swedish officials are saying they've never heard of this guy. Now, did he just punk Bill O'Reilly? Or did Bill O'Reilly get used by somebody to try and discredit people who are saying that there's a problem in Sweden, like this police officer? This may have been a poison the well stunt. But we've seen the videos with our own eyes, coming out of YouTube and live stream and all the rest of it. There is a problem. And the corporate media has been tasked with the job of convincing you that everything is just fine, that all of these people who are fleeing war zones and who were lured to Europe with promises of free stuff are just going to behave absolutely wonderfully when they realize they're not getting all the goodies they were promised here. Now, Marine Le Pen is out there and she's surging in the polls. She is vowing to remove France from the monster European Union and is going one step further, saying that France may work to form a new bloc of rebel nations that don't want to be part of Brussels any longer. Brussels has responded by screeching a demand for a new federal union to save the crumbling EU. Forget about a European Union. There's going to be a federated United States of Europe. And all of you former countries are going to be as helpless before the federal government as, well, the United States. They're pushing for more and more. Gina Miller is now out there pushing for a campaign for yet another vote that would block Brexit, and is out there saying that Parliament must have a full veto on the full vote on the outcome of the EU negotiations. Now, Ms. Miller was the person who led the High Court action that said Parliament had to approve triggering Article 50, which blew up in her face when Parliament did approve triggering Article 50. So this is still going on. The globalists are in a panic. They're losing their grip. They're so close to their dream of a one-world government, one-world private central bank, and they're getting desperate, and that's what makes them dangerous. Critics are accusing the European Parliament of censorship over the imposition of a kill switch that will kill a live debate feed over offensive remarks, with whatever's being offensive rather arbitrarily defined by whoever's got their finger on the switch. We got to take a break for station identification. Back with hour number 2 after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. We were talking about how the European Union wants to have a kill switch on all live video feeds. So if somebody says something offensive or against the status quo, they can be cut off immediately. Now, amazingly enough, according to an article that just came out of Government Slaves, President Trump was making a joke about the corporate media, and CNN cut him off. Getting on back to the Brexit. Apparently, there is yet another move to try and get another Brexit vote. And this Tory MP is out there saying, what are you going to go for, the best out of 3? We'll keep having elections until we get the results that we want. Seems to be the attitude that we have over there. All right, we're going to grab ourselves a phone call. Peter in Dallas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. I work at an alternative school, and I work with a lot of inner-city black kids. And I just have an observation I think I've never heard brought up before. But basically, when I would talk to my white friends, I'm a white guy, about these black kids, they would say they would accuse me of being prejudiced. And then I realized that there really is a lack of vocabulary when it comes to black people. You know, we white people, we can call somebody a redneck or a skinhead or an Italian or a wasp, but we have all these different ways of...
Okay, where are you going with this? Because I'm frankly...
I just want to say, when we talk about black people, we need to talk about specific groups of black people. Inner city black... How about...
Okay, hang on. Okay. First of all, when I talk about my circle of friends, I talk about my friends. And I don't break them up into my black friends, my Jewish friends, my gay friends, and so forth and so on. It seems to me that you're sort of going along with this idea that there should be wide-ranging generic labels, and maybe you want to refine them a little bit more. But I think we need to really focus on people being people. And if they're acting good, they're acting good. And if they're acting bad, they're acting bad. But you're absolutely right.
No,
hang on. Okay. When this idea where any criticism of the black community, even if it's fully justified, is being dismissed as racism, it almost seems like they're adopting the tactics that Israel has been using over the last 60 years. No matter what the comment or criticism is, oh, you're anti-Semitic. You hate the Jewish people. Okay, U.S. is liberty. You're an anti-Semite. Nuclear weapons. You're an anti-Semite. And now we're seeing the same thing here. When you talk about crime rates, oh, you're just being racist. Poor performance in school, oh, you're just being racist. And on and on and on. And we need to stop playing that game and deal with the individual. Okay?
That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying that at all.
Okay, well, what are you trying to say?
Well, if you listen to the news and they talk about black demonstrators, there are rioters and there are black demonstrators. There's middle-class blacks, but we're limited to the... If we're going to talk about looters and thugs, those are inner-city black kids, and we need to be able to talk about...
Let's just call them looters and thugs.
Without including the entire...
Let's just call them...
all of black
okay, all right, hang on. Thank you. Let's just call them looters and thugs. The color doesn't matter, does it? That's the way to go. Let's take the color out of it completely. You got looters and thugs, you got protesters. Period. End of discussion. I think we're going the wrong way on this debate here. All right, Sherry in Fredericksburg, Texas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Thank you, Mike. Here's something that was said that might make a difference. Whoever it was that said the free exchange of information is essential, etc., I think he left off something. If that person, was it a Bush person that said that?
No, what George W. Bush said was that a free press, meaning the corporate media, is essential to democracy, meaning to maintaining the illusion of democracy.
Okay, here, if he was quoting Thomas Jefferson, it goes like this. The free exchange of honest information is essential if a country is to be free or a democracy.
Yes.
The free exchange of honest information. I didn't know if I just didn't hear the honest or if it wasn't mentioned.
It wasn't in there. It wasn't in there. No, they're not talking about honest information. Because, again, the corporate media's stock in trade is lies, fraud, and deception. And they've been doing it for so long, any protestations that they're going to change their way are absolutely ludicrous. They have grown very wealthy and influential and powerful by misrepresenting the real world to the American people, whether it's simply to boost sales, like Hearst wanted to do by kicking up a war with Cuba, or the Spanish-American War, or in order to simply get us to go along with an agenda to invade another country, such as when they claimed Saddam had nuclear weapons.
Yeah, well, for someone who crafted our Constitution, I think he should have thought first before he spoke.
Which, Jefferson?
No, not Jefferson. Did you say George Bush?
George W. Bush. He's the one who called the Constitution.
No, George W. Bush.
Yeah, he's the one who called the Constitution a blankety-blank piece of paper.
Yeah, right. Well, I just wanted to point that out. Honest is very important.
Yes.
Honest, yes. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. The First Amendment does not exist to protect lies and liars. And oddly enough, there are politicians who are trying to get the courts to say that during campaign seasons, nobody can challenge the dishonest statements they make in their campaign speeches because that's their freedom of speech to be able to lie to you to get your vote. That's how perverted and twisted this whole thing has become. All righty. Now, over in London, Mayor Sadiq Khan has prompted a significant backlash in which he'd made a speech implying Scottish nationalism is racist. And apparently Scotland's First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, slammed his remarks as spectacularly ill-judged. And that's certainly true. I mean, and we're seeing that all over the place, where this idea of our nations wanting to take care of ourselves is being declared racist. Remember when the ADL came on out and said that Donald Trump's campaign slogan, Make America First, was racist? How dare you want your country to do well? That's his job. He's the President of the United States of America. His job is to make the United States better. We're going to do a shout-out now to all of our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Now, interestingly enough, the governor of Texas has issued a ban on sanctuary cities, warning that any city governments that continue the sanctuary city policy will be criminally prosecuted under Title VIII. No more safe spaces for illegal criminals. This has gone on way too far, and it is time to stop. Somebody posted a wonderful article, I think I put it in the Reader's Letters section, about somebody breaks into your house without your permission. And then while they're there, they clean the floor, and they do the dishes, and they make the beds and everything, and they say, can't we stay? We're a benefit here. And you say, no, you broke into my house. And they get their friends to stand outside picketing saying, we made their beds, we did their dishes, we cleaned their floors, and they won't let us stay. And that's exactly where we are right now with this situation. Now, over in Connecticut, last Wednesday, the governor, Daniel Malloy, issued a memo to his state's authorities declaring Connecticut a sanctuary state, ordering state authorities to ignore all federal laws regarding illegal immigrants. On Friday, a previously deported illegal alien murdered his girlfriend and kidnapped her 6-year-old daughter. Little bit of a whoopsie there. Now, in South Texas, they've arrested a Honduran national who has been deported and keeps coming back, and apparently he beat a Desert Storm veteran to death. Like I said, migration is a filtering process. You are not getting the best representatives of those source countries. The people who are doing well in those countries, they stay there. Remember what happened when Israel tried to convince the Iranian Jews to come to Israel, and they all said, no, we're comfortable here. We're doing good. We're perfectly happy here. Migration is a filtering process. You get people who aren't making it in their own country, either through lack of will or lack of education. You're getting people fleeing prosecution. You're getting people with contagious diseases. Now, do you remember back when Starbucks went up in favor of open borders by declaring they were going to hire 10,000 Muslim refugees? And apparently their brand name has taken a hit. Perception of Starbucks has fallen by 2/3 since their announcement last January, and their stock price has taken a major hit. And it is a reminder that Starbucks should stick with selling overpriced coffee and stay out of politics, because that's not what they do. In fact, I think this is the beginning of a trend where we're going to start seeing the American consumer turning away from all these establishments that are still out there pushing for open borders and immigrant or any of the liberal agenda. They're just fed up. That should have been the message they got from last November's election. We're fed up with the establishment. The establishment is still out there thinking, we can bring you back into our warm embrace. Okay, apparently Yad Vashem's director of libraries, Dr. Robert Rosette, has directed a letter to the CEO of Amazon, Jeff Bezos, demanding that Amazon stop selling any books that question the orthodox telling of the Holocaust. Israel does seem to hate that freedom of speech thing. And I want to make a point here. If you go on out and say that you saw Bigfoot, people will chuckle at you. That's it. If you claim that you saw the Loch Ness Monster, they'll smile. You don't lose your job. You don't get thrown in jail. You claim you were taken for a ride on a flying saucer, they'll look at you a little odd, consider you a kook, and that's it. Your life isn't destroyed for it. You ask a question about the Holocaust, you are blacklisted, you are at threat of legal prosecution. The sheer intensity of force brought to bear on this question tells you something's being hidden. The history of the Holocaust is the only history on all of Earth that you can go to prison for questioning. Doesn't it make it obvious something is being hidden from the American people? Speaking of Amazon, you need to be aware, apparently there is yet another in an endless series of scams being perpetrated on the American people, where emails are going on out purporting to be from Amazon, and apparently they are phishing attacks. And so you need to be taking a good look for that. There's a lot of scams going on. The one about, can you hear me? That's still out there. The government's not doing a thing about it. NSA is not doing a thing about it. They could care less. They're probably buying stock in computer security and identity theft protection companies. And the more identity theft and crime is going on, the more money they're going to make. Talk about a corrupted society here. Now, Israel is not a big fan of the First Amendment. They're also not a big fan of the Fourth Amendment because apparently the same people who created the USB malware which can cause a regular USB thumb drive to emit radio waves another computer can intercept. They have a new one called Let It Go, where it will program the LED on the front of your computer to send data out to a hovering drone outside. Even having an air-gapped computer is no longer secure. And have you ever noticed it's all these Israelis who are spending all this time and money figuring out how to break into computers that do not belong to them? Kind of a interesting little aspect out there. Now, the brouhaha over Google's blacklisting of natural news is continuing. We're now into 5 days since Google just unilaterally delinked all of natural news from their search engine. Natural news is still there, and it's visible in other search engines, like DuckDuckGo and Yandex and a couple of others I've tried. This is just Google. Google put out a statement that there was this adware script that was the cause of the blacklisting. As it turned out, the adware script had actually been removed from natural news years ago and was found to actually be on Google's own servers. There is a White House petition on this matter. It is already at 2/3, or actually it's over half, approaching 2/3 of the necessary signatures, and we have until March 25th to get this. We need to put this over the top and force this issue. Meanwhile, I would strongly recommend to everybody that you stop using the Google search engine. Because if you're researching something that's important, especially related to your health, you are not going to get the information you need to make a good choice. You're going to get nonstop corporate propaganda to get you to spend your money on the medical industrial complex. Now, another story coming out of Natural News itself. After blacklisting Natural News, Google takes no such action against Huffington Post, BuzzFeed, Forbes, and CNN for writers who are selling outbound links in violation of the Webmaster Guidelines. In other words, all these liberal establishments are breaking Google's rules. Google isn't doing a thing to them. This was motivated by greed, motivated by fear, and certainly we know there is a major battle brewing over vaccine safety, because Donald Trump has set up this Vaccine Safety Commission. It's being chaired by Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and the vaccine industry is trying to preemptively shut them down, or to find some way to erase from the Internet any articles that question vaccine safety, because there's $30 billion a year on the line, plus civil litigation that will put them entirely out of business if it ever, when it comes on out that they've known all along of these problems and chose to do nothing. Now, the indemnification of the vaccine industry in the Homeland Security Act only protects them against harm caused by accident, by having to rush through the process in the event of a biological terror attack. No indemnification, no corporate law can protect the executives at these vaccine industries from prosecution for criminal actions. And knowing their vaccines were causing harm and choosing not to do anything about it, preferring to cover it all up, that is a criminal action. And this is going to be a fist fight. This is going to be a street brawl for truth and health versus corporate profitability. And remember, CDC is not an objective, impartial arbiter. They are a vaccine company. They have over 20 patents for vaccines they've developed themselves. They pull in $4.5 billion of that $30 billion every year. They are not honest and accurate and objective. They have a financial incentive to rig the tests. And we already know one of the CDC's official reports claiming to prove there was no link between autism and mercury in vaccines was a fraud. One of the authors of that report blew the whistle and said the data was cherry-picked to produce a desired outcome. Now, over on Wikipedia, kind of an interesting story going on. Wikipedia actually has software robots that are supposed to be improving articles on the site, and apparently it's been discovered they actually get into conflicts over content. And they actually undo each other's edits back and forth, which calls into question the overall accuracy of Wikipedia. Of course, I knew they were not being accurate about me. So, HSBC Banking for Business is down. Major online outage causing problems there. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Apparently, Google Chrome 56's crypto tweak has borked thousands of computers that are using Blue Coat security. And apparently, this flawed TLS 1.3 is taking down Chromebooks and PCs. I've noticed over the last couple of years that software developers, software companies, and especially the people who write scripts for online advertisers are getting very, very sloppy. They're not being careful. And part of it is that there is such a Babel-like multiplicity of interfaces that everyone has to deal with, and that's part of the problem. And the other part of the problem, of course, is product indemnity. Now, Donald Trump's, the White House sent out this email survey earlier today in anticipation of Donald Trump's speech to a joint session of Congress tomorrow. And along with all the check boxes, there was an area for comments, which I made very, very much use of. And one of the comments I put in was, it is time to rethink product liability indemnity. Because when you take a particular product and you say the manufacturer, the provider, will not suffer any financial harm for problems their product causes, then you disincentivize that manufacturer, that lab, that engineering firm from taking the necessary steps to produce a quality, safe product. And the specific examples I listed was vaccines, which are indemnified under the Homeland Security Act, and computers and software, which are still protected by that end-user license agreement that goes all the way back to the early days of the Apple II. And I said, this is impacting our balance of trade, because American products are now getting a reputation for being not only overpriced, but of high failure rates and poor quality. And if we're going to make America great again, the first place we have to do that is to be seen around the world as providing quality products at a fair price, not to mention GMO-free agriculture, which was another comment I made there. So let's talk about human-caused global warming. It is snowing in the Ozark Mountains, which apparently caught a lot of those people by surprise. And they're still out there pushing catastrophic global warming. Over in the Vancouver Sun, they had an article on how climate change is predicted to transform Vancouver into San Diego. In other words, there is a new climate change study heavily funded by who knows who, basically saying that the temperatures in Vancouver will exceed those of Southern California in the coming decades. They're still out there pushing that nonsense. Now, there's another article over in the Daily Wire. Apparently, over at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, geoscientist and Northwestern astrophysicist came up with an explanation for the fluctuations of Earth's temperatures that the global warming people want to make go away. This is a refinement of an article that we mentioned a couple of weeks ago about how when Jupiter and Saturn are aligned, they distort the Earth's orbit just a little tiny bit, resulting in cooler temperatures on Earth. This study basically focused on Earth and its interactions with the planet Mars. Now, the global warming people want you to think that we live in a static, unchanging universe, and that if it wasn't for us icky-poo human beings, the temperature on Earth would remain unchanged. That is, of course, complete nonsense. The fossil record, the geological record shows temperature, climate is always changing. It always has, it always will. But they're still pushing for that carbon tax and to get you to agree to let a global environmental authority tell you how you're allowed to live. I don't think so. And I'm not saying I'm anti-nature and anti-conservation, but more and more we're seeing all these people screaming about saving planet Earth, and they themselves aren't really doing anything to save the planet Earth. Many of them live very wasteful lives themselves. If you've never read it, you need to hunt down a book by Michael Crichton called State of Fear. You can get it at the used bookstores. You need to read that one. We'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. I'm looking on Fox News right now, and apparently the Democrats are still out there saying, we need to impeach Donald Trump. We've got to get rid of him now. We've got to do this. And apparently one of their arguments is that Donald Trump's great wealth represents undue influence on him. In other words, the fact that Donald Trump has made his own money and has not spent his entire life sucking on the taxpayers for a living disqualifies him from office. That's the Democratic thinking that's out there. Now, there's not going to be an impeachment because there's a GOP majority in both houses. They're still out there talking about the 25th Amendment. And you know what is really amazing is there was this commentator the other day who said the reason that Hillary Clinton lost her election bid was that she, and for that matter John Podesta, were very much out of touch with what the public was seeing and thinking. And I think that blindness is still going on because it's obvious to me that the Democratic leadership, the liberal leadership, do not understand how much damage they're doing to their brand by continuing with all this nattering and gromishing about impeachment or 25th Amendment or somehow getting rid of Donald Trump. And he's only been in office a month, effectively. And they're already out there playing Donald Segretti-type games to try and undermine the GOP. It's like we're going to spend the next 4 years in the next presidential campaign. I'm very much in agreement with those countries that say the campaigns are only allowed to last for so many months before the actual election, and outside of that, you just shut the heck up. Because I don't think a government that spends all of its time campaigning is going to be capable of doing an effective job at actually trying to run this country. They don't seem to care. Now, we had last year's campaign season. Everybody got to shout accusations and allegations. The voters spoke. We have a new president. And I'll be the first to admit, I don't agree with everything he's doing. There are some areas in which I'm very disappointed in Donald Trump. I still maintain that Donald Trump, at his worst, is still a heck of a lot better than Hillary Clinton at her best. But we're past that now. The politics, the campaigning should have ended with the election. And instead we got riots and we got recounts and we got this and we got that, and they're still out there thinking somewhere in their fevered brains that there's a way they can undo this, that they can actually live in that fantasy land website where Hillary won the election. And I think most normal, rational people looking at the behavior of the Democrats are not seeing them in a very positive light. I hope the new leadership coming in to the Democratic National Committee is going to look around and realize it wasn't just Hillary Clinton that has destroyed the brand. It's the Democrats themselves. And if they keep behaving like this, two things are going to happen. One, they are not going to be able to find some way to get Donald Trump out of that White House. And two, they will damage the Democratic image so badly, we're all going to be living under Republicans for the next 30 to 40 years. The Democrats are self-destructing, along with the corporate media, lackeys. The election's over. Let's get back to working on making the country better and stop screaming about whether or not Trump is going to allow transgenders to use alternate restrooms. It really has gone on way too far. It's looking silly, and it's humiliating for the American people to see their government behave like this. It's embarrassing us around the world. The rest of the world is looking at the United States right now, and they see us as a big joke. They won't laugh because we've got nuclear weapons and a willingness to use them, but they're seeing us as a joke. I feel very sorry for the children of this country that are being encouraged to grow up into adults, and they look around and they see all of our nation's leaders behaving like children. What kind of an example is that setting? Anyway, back to global warming. Congress is now getting ready to launch an investigation into the revelation that the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration used fraudulent science in their report that was issued just before the Paris Accord, the UN Global Warming Treaty, to claim that there had been no pause in warming, that the world was still warming, it was broiling like crazy, and yes, there's snow and ice in there, but if you take your temperature in between the icicles, you'll find it's almost boiling. And Congress is now investigating. I know that Trump is cutting funding to the EPA. I think he ought to also be looking seriously at cutting funding to NOAA. And I think the funding into NASA that is being used to rubber stamp the global warming hoax, that ought to be cut and repurposed to sending America back out into space. Now, Donald Trump says he wants to go back to the moon, wants to send man to the moon again, and the feminists are already screaming, why can't you send them all? Elon Musk says he wants to privatize lunar travel. Boy, would that be fun. And that's one thing I'm definitely very much in favor of Donald Trump, not because I want to see our flag out there in the solar system. I have a mild curiosity about indigenous life on Mars. But the tech boom of the 70s, 80s, and 90s in this country was forged in the civilian technology incubator of the Apollo moon program. We need a new civilian technology incubator that's going to come up with the new materials, the new processes, the new industries, the new products that will allow America to become a major exporter of goods as we head further into the 21st century. If we don't get that technology incubator, we're lost. Our previous administrations foolishly allowed other countries to take over the manufacturing of technologies we developed, and those countries aren't going to be foolish enough to let it come back. They're going to be fighting it tooth and nail. We have to leapfrog ahead into whatever is next. And restart our economy based on that new technology. That's it. That's the only way forward at this point. Now, then, you probably heard earlier today, and I don't normally do celebrity news, but actor Bill Paxton is dead. He was 61 years old. And he died from complications of surgery. Remember what we said the other day about how many people in this country are killed every year by medical mistake? Certainly seemed to be the case with Neil Armstrong. Certainly seems to be the case with Bill Paxton. You know, doctors love celebrities too. Oh, I want to say I operated on Neil Armstrong. I want to say I operated on Bill Paxton. So there's a story, and again, this is coming from Natural News, and it's talking about a massive cover-up as thousands of medical studies are found to be wildly inaccurate. And we know that under pressure from the medical industrial complex, scientists are writing reports that support a particular line of product. And very often these reports leave out important data like contraindications. They're outright fraudulent, like that CDC report on vaccines and autism. They're not really scientific papers. They're advertising, dressed up to look like scientific papers. And science has become very corrupted in this country for economic and political reasons, which is why you shouldn't trust anything somebody says that they claim is scientific. Of course, you never should have. Science was never supposed to be about trust and belief. Science is about scientific method, and scientific method rests on reproducibility. If this scientist over here says, I have these chemicals, I mix them together, I get this result, you should be able to take the same chemicals, mix them together with the same procedure, and get the same result. That's what reproducibility is. If you don't have reproducibility, it isn't science, it's propaganda. Now, we've been talking before about the great statin scam, where statins were the wonder drug to help clean out your arteries and prevent heart attacks, and then it turned out it was actually causing more heart attacks because the plaque in the arteries wasn't coming off slowly, but breaking off in big chunks that could lodge in inconvenient locations. So now there's a new article out, organicandhealthy.org, where apparently statin drugs like Crestor, Lipitor, and Zocor are accelerating aging, causing brain damage and diabetes. Now, we were talking about the $80 billion a year vaccine industry in this country. Prescription drugs are a almost $400 billion a year business in this country. All about the money. All right, we're going to grab a phone call here. Steve in California, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, in my travels today, I happened to listen to some radio, Michael Medved. You're probably familiar with the host.
Mm-hmm.
But he was mentioning a quote from Donald Trump, President Donald Trump, in that never enter into a war that you can't win. And he was making that quote in reference to Donald Trump taking on the mainstream media. And he said that Donald Trump shouldn't do this, shouldn't go after him. What do you think about that?
Basically, the idea is the media, the corporate media, is losing the fight against Donald Trump and the independent media. Polls are showing the American people trust Donald Trump's direct communications much more than they trust what's coming out of the corporate media. Polls are also showing that more people are listening to the independent media's analysis than the corporate media. And so all they can do is stand there and say, you shouldn't criticize us. You shouldn't question us. We're the holy corporate media. We are sacrosanct. You are being a heretic. And that's about all they've got left to play here right now. And Donald Trump has as much right to criticize the corporate media as anybody else in this country, protected by that First Amendment. And anybody who says Donald Trump shouldn't be questioning the corporate media is displaying their hatred of what America is supposed to be about.
I agree. He did also mention, which I'm sure it's substantiated, that he mentioned that the New York Times' subscription has increased with this attack on Donald Trump, and I would disagree. I didn't see, you just can't say it. You got to show some proof, but I can't imagine that people are still subscribing to the New York Times. I think that's unsubstantiated,
Well, I would too, but again, in this world where we're finding out the corporate media are buying botnet clicks to their websites to drive up their numbers, they're buying fake Twitter followers, I can imagine that the New York Times would not be the first newspaper to have artificially inflated their subscription numbers in order to stay solvent. And remember, the New York Times is already in serious trouble. They're vacating 8 floors of their own building to turn it into rental office space. And so they're in serious trouble. I wouldn't trust New York Times claims about their subscription numbers.
I wouldn't either. Hey, one last thing really quick, Aiea. It's just an observation I made, but do you remember when the United States verbally attacked France for not backing the war? So, we're not going to call French toast, it's freedom toast and freedom fries and all that nonsense.
Cheese-eating surrender monkeys.
I was at the grocery store, 3 different grocery stores I went to, and I don't know if there's something with this, but you cannot find Russian salad dressing anywhere. I kid you not.
I'll have to check that out next time I go to the market.
3 different stores, there is no Russian salad dressing to be found in any of the stores.
I'll have to look for that, because I actually like Russian dressing.
I do too. You can't find it. So look at that, see if you can verify that on your end too.
All right, I'll definitely take a look next time at the market. Thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. All righty. Now then, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Is out there on the forefront of this growing realization that we live in a country where the medical establishment exists to loot you of your wealth and not necessarily to make you better. In fact, they don't want to cure you of anything. Cures are bad business. Constant treatments of symptoms is good business. So Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has called the CDC a vaccine company, and he's right. They are. They have over 20 patents on vaccines from which they make $4.5 billion every year. He's calling it a cesspool of corruption, and basically says that this policy of allowing thimerosal-laced vaccines appears to be targeting poorer neighborhoods because these preservatives are used in the cheapest vaccines used at the publicly funded urban clinics. We have a multiple-tiered medical system. The former Soviet Union used to have the same thing. There was the socialized medicine program for the ordinary Soviet citizen. The Soviet elites had private hospitals with Western medicines, the very best of everything. We have the same thing here. Now then, over in Oroville, California, as of today, they're starting to shut down the flow of water through the crippled concrete spillway. They're hoping to have it perfectly closed by Wednesday in order to start clearing away the debris that has backed up into the power station. We're going to take another phone call. Mark in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, well, hi, Mike. You know, what that guy was talking about, Michael Medved, when I was living in Amarillo, Texas, he was on there for a while. And this guy's a major neocon, major establishment Republican, establishment conservative. I mean, he was for John McCain back in 2008. He supported McCain from the get-go. He's for every intervention, military intervention you can imagine, and then some. He thought it was a great thing the United States did in Yugoslavia when we, with the butchers of Belgrade there.
Yep.
He just, you name a war and an intervention, he thinks American exceptionalism means America has the right and the duty to say.
I don't see him enlisting in the military, though.
No, of course not. He never was in the military. As a matter of fact, he was a draft dodger.
Yeah, we see that. Okay.
But the thing is, he also says American exceptionalism basically means America, of all countries, has the right to go in there and change a regime.
Yeah, well, there's too many people who believe that. Anyway, listen, Mark, I'm sorry to cut you off. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be back with the last segment of our program today after these few words. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to the show here today. And apparently, somebody decided whether they were going to find out how much chicken is in chicken salads, or chicken food rather. So over at Government Slaves, they're talking about this research project that went on out to various fast food stores, and they availed themselves of the chicken products there, and they did DNA tests on the chicken itself without condiments, without buns, without anything like that. And what they found is A&W Chicken Grill Deluxe averaged 89% chicken DNA in the chicken. Now, it's never going to be 100% because of things that happen during the cooking process. McDonald's Country Chicken, 84.9% chicken DNA. Tim Hortons Chipotle Chicken Grilled Wrap averaged 86% chicken DNA. Wendy's Grilled Chicken Sandwich, 88% chicken DNA. The shocker was when they went to Subway sandwiches. And the oven roasted chicken scored just 53.6% chicken DNA. The chicken strips were down at 42.8%. The rest of it, soy. Now, Subway is one of those stores that likes to portray itself as healthy. Remember when they had that gentleman who'd lost all the weight just eating at Subway, and he was their spokesman for a long time until he got caught with the little kitties. You really do have to be careful. You have to take responsibility for what you're eating. And I think one of the reasons why fast food restaurants are seeing a dramatic drop in business is people don't trust what is being prepared for them. They're preferring to go to the market, buying stuff where they know what they're getting from the local farmers markets and just cooking and eating healthy food, which of course has been declared a mental illness in the United States called orthorexia nervosa. If you're not willing to gorge yourself on Big Macs, you are mentally ill and you will have to be sent to a re-education center. Getting on back to NASA, apparently NASA is getting ready to launch a solar mission. They're describing it as touching the sun. It'll be the closest spacecraft to the sun in history. I'm sure everybody's asking, how are you going to deal with the intense heat? And somebody at NASA is probably going to say, well, we're planning to go at night. I'm kidding, of course. But it is an ambitious project. I still want to see what's down there in that atmosphere of Jupiter. And it was rather frustrating that the two actual spacecraft that were dropped into the Jovian atmosphere did not have cameras. Because that would have been, I think, interesting. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe they don't figure you can see more than 1.5 feet in front of you down there. And finally, interesting little story where in San Francisco, this man literally repopulated the entire city with butterflies grown and bred in his own backyard. He'd noticed this butterfly seemed to be going extinct, so he set up a little hatchery in his backyard, and the butterflies are coming back to San Francisco. I think that is so cool, and it shows how just one person can make a significant change to the world. There's the music. Time for me to get out of here and do the Jim Goddard Show. We'll be back tomorrow here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Until then, stay informed, stay skeptical, make good choices, share what you know with everybody that you know. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.